The envelope was taped to the back of a photo frame. It wasn't labeled. Just a small brass key tucked behind a picture of her father standing in front of his workshop, smiling like he hadn't yet learned how to lose. Callie found it 2 weeks after the funeral. Her father had been everything: carpenter, storyteller, stubborn as hell, but he hadn't been one for long goodbyes. No will, no note. Just a workshop at the edge of town and memories that smelled like cedar and coffee grounds. The key was small, cold in her palm. It wasn't for the house. She knew that key same one since childhood. No, this one was older. Thinner. For the place she'd avoided since the day the paramedics carried him out on a cold Wednesday morning while she stood in the driveway, shaking, and 20 minutes too late. Callie hadn't been home in 4 years. Not since the fight. Not since the things they said loud and sharp and soaked in all the pain they hadn't talked about when her mother left. But now the house was hers. The shop was too. And the key in her hand felt like both invitation and dare. That afternoon, she walked down the gravel path behind the house, crunching dry leaves and memory with every step. The workshop sat like it always had, square and low and sun-bleached. A place built with hands that believed in fixing what broke. The lock turned with a click that echoed louder than it should have. Inside, everything was just as he'd left it. Dust in the light, tools on the wall, a stool by the workbench's coffee mug still half full, the rim etched with years of use. But what made her stop, what made her knees shake, was the notebook sitting open on the bench, her name written across the top in black marker, Callie's list. And beneath it, 10 things. 10 unfinished projects. 10 repairs he never got around to. And at the bottom, scribbled in his rough, familiar handwriting, "If you're reading this, it means you came back. That's enough for now." The list was short, but each item was specific. Fix the porch swing, left chains loose. Replace the back fence gate. Sand the rocking chair, your mother's S. Rewire the lamp from Grandpa's study. Tighten hinges on Kelly's bedroom door. Oil the piano pedals. Mend the crack in the kitchen tile. Replace the screen in the attic window. Refinish the coffee table. Use cherry stain. Fix the clock. You know the one. Callie stood staring at the notebook for a long time. The handwriting was his, no doubt uneven, and slanted from years of holding tools instead of pens. There were coffee rings on the corner of the page, a fingerprint in sawdust. Each line was like a breadcrumb leading her backward. She read them again, then a third time, and finally, she walked back up to the house and sat on the porch swing. Sure enough, the left chain creaked every time she shifted her weight. It had always done that. She'd grown up hearing the faint metal groan during summers spent reading books with her legs tucked under her, or nights lying beside her dad, while fireflies blinked in the yard. She fetched his old toolbox. The chain was easy to fix, just a matter of replacing the anchor bolt. She found one in the drawer labeled "Extra Screws per F8, her father's sense of humor, undiminished even in labels. It took 15 minutes, a wrench, and one skinned knuckle. When she sat back down, it didn't creak, not once. She let herself swing for a while. Then she cried quietly, not because of the bolt or the swing or even the silence in the house behind her. She cried because it felt like her dad had left her a map, not to things, to him, to the version of them that existed before the last argument, before the slamming of doors and the things they didn't say. And maybe, if she followed the list, she'd find more than repaired furniture. Maybe she'd find the version of herself she lost too. The back fence gate hadn't latched properly since Callie was 16. It sagged just enough to catch on the dirt, and every time the wind blew, it groaned like it might fall apart altogether. Her father had promised to fix it next weekend. That weekend never came. Now, years later, she stood with the toolbox again, staring at the splintered hinge and rusted screws. The job was simple, but halfway through unscrewing the old latch, a voice called over the fence. "I didn't think you'd come back." Callie froze, then straightened slowly. Over the top of the fence, she saw him, Levi Barrett. Same crooked smile, slightly longer beard, and eyes that hadn't changed since high school. He used to mow lawns in the summer and steal glances at her over the handle of the push mower. They'd shared one kiss behind the bleachers junior year. Then her mother left, her father shut down, and she stopped showing up to school dances or anything at all. "I didn't think you still lived here," she said. "Bought the place from my parents last fall. Figured someone should keep the porch lights on." He climbed the short ladder leaning against his side and peeked over. "You fixing the gate?" She held up the screwdriver. "Trying." Levi smiled. "Need help?" She hesitated, then nodded. 10 minutes later, he was kneeling beside her, holding the gate steady while she swapped out the hinges. They worked mostly in silence, save for the occasional instruction or shared laugh when a screw refused to cooperate. When the gate finally swung open cleanly and latched without a sound, Levi stepped back. Your dad would have been proud. Callie didn't answer at first. The words sat somewhere behind her ribs, too big to push through yet. Instead, she said, "There's a list." "A list?" She nodded. "He left it for me. 10 things to fix." Levi looked at her, a softness in his eyes. "Then I guess you've got work to do." That evening, Callie returned to the workshop. The sun dipped low, spilling gold across the wooden floor. Dust danced in the light like it remembered every step her father ever took in this room. She opened the notebook again and stared at the third item. 3. Sand the rocking chair. Your mother's ice. The chair sat in the corner, legs wrapped in old rags to keep it from scratching the floor. It was maple, hand-carved, with a worn floral cushion that had once matched the living room curtains. Callie ran her fingers across the armrest. Smooth, but not finished. Behind her, the door creaked. Levi leaned in, holding a brown paper bag. "Figured you hadn't eaten." She smiled faintly. "What is it?" 2 grilled cheese sandwiches and 1 very questionable root beer. They sat on the steps outside, eating in silence. The cicadas had started their chorus, and the breeze smelled like cut grass and wood shavings. After a while, Levi broke the quiet. "Your dad used to let me hang out in that shop when I was 15. I thought I was helping him, but I think now he just needed someone to talk to." Callie turned to him. "He talked to you?" "More than you'd expect. Not about deep stuff, but enough." She swallowed. "He didn't talk much at home," I figured. "He didn't know how to deal with Mom leaving. Neither did I." Levi nodded, thoughtful. "He told me once some things break easy. Some take years to snap. You gotta know the difference, or you'll blame the wrong person." Callie looked away. Her throat tightened. "I spent so long blaming him," she whispered. "For shutting down, for letting things fall apart. You think he blamed himself? I think he didn't know how not to." Levi stood slowly, brushing crumbs from his jeans. "You're fixing his list. Maybe he hoped that by the time you got to the end, you'd understand him better." Callie looked at the workshop again. "Maybe so. But understanding him wasn't just in finishing the repairs. It was in sitting in the same sawdust-covered silence, hearing the same cicadas, feeling the weight of things left unsaid and choosing to stay anyway." The rocking chair was heavier than she remembered. Callie dragged it into the center of the workshop, careful not to scuff the floor. The cushion was faded, edges fraying, the fabric worn thin where years of movement had left their mark. She peeled it back slowly. The wood underneath had gone dry with age, but the curves were still graceful, her father's work, undoubtedly. He'd carved roses into the arms, faint but still there. Her mother had loved roses. Red ones. Always red. As she unzipped the cushion to remove the lining, something fell out. A white envelope. Callie froze. It was yellowed, sealed with old wax. Her name was written on the front in neat, elegant handwriting she hadn't seen since she was 15. Her mother's. She sat back slowly, the envelope trembling in her hands. For years, she'd wondered why her mother left, why she packed a suitcase and walked out without a word. Her father never gave answers. Just silence. Just bitterness. Callie had learned to stop asking. Now, the answer sat in her palm. She didn't open it right away. She placed it on the workbench, finished sanding the arms of the chair, and only when the wood was smooth and the room was quiet again, did she pick it up. She broke the seal with a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. "My Callie, if you're reading this, it means I never found the right time. I wanted to explain. I wanted to stay, but I couldn't be who I was in that house anymore. Not with the silence. Not with your father's grief wrapped so tightly around everything we touched. I left so I wouldn't become someone I hated. But I never stopped loving you. Please don't let my leaving be the loudest thing you remember about me. You were the best part of my life. Mom." Callie folded the letter with shaking hands. She didn't cry. Not then. But the ache in her chest felt old and familiar and finally seen. Callie didn't sleep that night. The letter sat on her nightstand, its words echoing louder in the dark than they had in the workshop. Her mother's voice, absent for so long now, filled the room like it had never left. By morning, Callie knew she couldn't carry it alone. She found Levi in his front yard, watering a garden bed that had more weeds than vegetables. He looked up as she approached, eyes catching hers like he already knew. "You okay?" he asked. She didn't answer, just handed him the letter. Levi didn't read it right away. He stepped onto the porch and sat on the old swing, motioning for her to sit beside him. When he finally opened it, The paper crinkled softly in his hands. He read it once. Then again. When he finished, he folded it carefully and handed it back. "You've been carrying that weight a long time," he said. She left without saying goodbye. "She also didn't stop loving you. I used to think maybe I wasn't enough to make her stay." Levi turned to her. "You were never the reason she left, Callie. You were the reason she held on as long as she did." Callie blinked back tears. "She wrote that before she walked out." She hid it in the chair. "It's like she knew she couldn't say it to my face." "Some truths are easier to write," Levi said. "Doesn't mean they don't matter." They sat in silence for a while, the swing creaking beneath them. Callie leaned her head back, watching the clouds move above the power lines. "I don't know what to do with this," she said. "The letter, the truth, the years I spent angry. Maybe you don't need to do anything. Maybe it's enough to just let it live next to the anger. Not erase it. Just make room for both." Callie looked at him, surprised by the wisdom in his voice. "You sound like someone who's been through this." Levi gave a small smile. "My dad left too. Didn't leave a letter though, just left." "Did it get easier?" "No," he said. "But I got better at holding the hard parts." That night, Callie placed the letter in a clean envelope and tucked it into the bottom drawer of the workbench. Not hidden, just waiting. She didn't need to forgive everything. Not yet. But maybe, just maybe, she was ready to understand. The next morning, Callie returned to the shop with purpose. The next item on the list, the lamp from Grandpa's study, was manageable. But her hands led her somewhere else. Back to the storage cabinet in the corner, the one her father always kept locked. She remembered being 10 years old, trying to pick the latch with a bobby pin while he was in the kitchen. He'd caught her and laughed, told her, "Some surprises have to earn their moment." Now the cabinet stood unlocked. Inside, among scraps of wood and bundles of wiring, was a long cardboard tube. She pulled it out and gently unwound the paper inside. It was a blueprint. A small desk. Compact but elegant, with rounded edges and a side shelf shaped like a crescent moon. At the top, scribbled in pencil, Callie's writing desk. Her breath caught. She hadn't written anything creative since college. She barely journaled anymore. And yet, here was a blueprint for something he must have drawn up years ago maybe, even before the arguments, before the distance. The instructions were detailed. Sand this section twice. Use birch for the legs, maple for the top. Stain it with honeywood finish. And at the bottom, a single line. For the stories you haven't told yet. Callie sat down on the stool and let the paper roll gently beside her. She tried to imagine him here, building it, measuring, cutting, brushing on stain, with hands that didn't always know how to comfort, but always knew how to create. The desk had never been finished. But maybe it still could be. The next morning, she cleared space in the center of the workshop. She laid out the blueprint, smoothed its edges, and ran her fingers over the soft lines of her father's sketch. There was care in it, precision, but something gentler, too, like he was building not just furniture, but a future for her he never got to see. She found the birch boards in the supply rack, still tugged, still uncut. She set up the table saw, measured twice, and began. The whir of the blade filled the space, loud but not harsh. It was a sound she remembered from childhood, a kind of background heartbeat to her memories. She used to think the shop was magic because it turned rough, raw things into something beautiful. Now she understood. The magic was in the effort. The choice to shape something anyway. She sanded the legs until her hands ached, stained the surface with the honeywood finish he'd noted. Each step was slow, deliberate, like prayer. And by the end of the third day, the frame of the desk stood sturdy, beautiful, unmistakably his in its simplicity, but hers in intent. She sat beside it and stared at the grain of the wood. Then she picked up a pen, not because she had anything planned, not because she felt ready, but because it felt wrong not to. Day 1. I built something. I don't know if it's a desk or a goodbye. Maybe both. The words weren't poetry. They weren't even good, but they were hers. And as she kept writing little fragments, thoughts, memories, maybe even a story, she realized something. The desk wasn't just a project. It was a key to a part of her that had gone quiet for years. The girl who used to write stories in the margins of her math books, who stayed up late inventing worlds and characters and conversations no one else could hear. That girl hadn't left. She'd just been waiting. For wood. For time. For a reason to come back. And now, she had one. Levi knocked on the workshop door just after lunch. He held a folding chair under one arm and a sheepish smile under his cap. I think it's time this thing had a second life, he said. Callie raised an eyebrow. I haven't seen that since we were kids. He nodded. My grandfather used to sit in it every Sunday. Your dad built it for him after his first stroke. Callie remembered the chair. Oak, with thick armrests and a leather cushion that had cracked over time. Mr. Barrett used to say it was the only chair that didn't make his bones hurt. Levi set it down gently in the center of the shop. It's been in our garage since he passed, he said. I figured, if you're fixing things, Callie smiled. Let's fix it. They worked side by side. She pulled out the old nails while Levi sanded the legs. Every now and then they bumped shoulders. Not awkward, just familiar. They talked too, but it wasn't small talk. It was the kind of conversation that lived in the quiet between words. He told her about the job he left in Nashville, the engagement that ended not with a fight but with silence. She told him about the publishing internship she quit when it got too hard to fake happiness. Neither of them had stayed gone because they hated where they came from. They'd just forgotten how to belong. By the time the sun began to dip, the chair was standing tall again, cushion restitched, joints tightened. Levi ran his hand across the wood and let out a breath. He would have liked this. Callie looked at him. So would my dad. He turned to her. You're really staying this time? She hesitated, then said, I don't know if I'm staying, but I'm not running. And in the space between their shoulders, something softened. That night, Callie returned to the house with sore hands and sawdust on her jeans. She made tea, fed the cat that wasn't really hers but showed up every other day, and opened her laptop more out of habit than purpose. She hadn't checked her email in a week. Most of it was junk ads, newsletters she never read, a chain of half-hearted job postings, but then she saw it. Subject: Your short story submission. Still interested? Her heart thudded. She clicked. It was from a small literary magazine she'd submitted to over a year ago. Back then, she'd sent the story on a whim, then forgot about it during the chaos of moving, quitting, grieving. The editor had written, Hi Callie. We apologize for the late replier piece. What the window saw resurfaced during a content review. It's lovely, quiet, sharp, and full of soul. We'd love to publish it in our autumn issue if it's still available. Please confirm by the 15th. Hope this finds you well. Talia, senior editor. Callie stared at the screen. The story had been about a woman rebuilding a house after her partner died. Fiction, mostly. But now, it felt strangely prophetic. She leaned back in her chair, eyes still on the message. Was she still interested? She thought about the list in her father's notebook, about the chair they'd just repaired, about the desk still smelling of fresh stain, and about how, for the first time in years, she felt like the person who wrote that story in the first place, the one who believed in what she had to say. She clicked reply. Hi Talia. Yes, I'm still interested. Thank you for finding it. Callie. She hit send, then closed the laptop and stood in the dark kitchen, her hands trembling slight not with fear, but anticipation. Because some dreams don't die. They just wait for you to catch up. The final item on the list wasn't a surprise. 10. Fix the clock. You know the one. She did. It was the mantel clock. The one that used to tick softly in the background of every childhood memory. It had stopped on the same day her mother left 4:17 p.m., and her father never fixed it. Callie found it buried in the back of a cabinet, wrapped in a towel, as if someone couldn't bear to throw it out, but couldn't bear to hear it anymore either. She brought it to the workshop and placed it on the bench. It was beautiful in a quiet, old-world way. Dark cherry wood. Brass details. A little door on the back. She opened it carefully, half expecting dust or silence. Instead, she found a folded piece of paper tucked behind the mechanism. Not old. Newer than the rest. Her name on the front. Her father's handwriting. Her breath caught as she opened it. Callie. If you're reading this, it means you didn't just come back, you stayed long enough to finish something. And maybe that's all life ever asks of us. I didn't know how to say I was sorry, but I want you to know I was trying. Every drawer I organized, everything I left behind it was for you, not because I wanted you to carry the weight, but because I hoped it would help you let go of it. Fixing the clock won't fix the past, but maybe it'll help it tick again. Love you, kid. Always did. Always will. Dad. Callie folded the note slowly, tears sliding silently down her cheeks. She wiped them away, picked up the tiny screwdriver, and got to work.